Boom! It is Friday. This is Why Libertarian. We are live every night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I am Matt. If you are new to this channel, or even if you're returning and you haven't done this already, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get this information out there. I am here every single Monday through Friday at 7 p.m., bringing you awesome guests, information on decentralization. Last night we kicked off a series that we're going to be doing on natural rights and talking about how lawyers and judges do not know what they're talking about whatsoever, and so why our legal system is garbage in, garbage out. Tonight I have an absolutely fantastic guest. Before we get rolling, if you are watching on something other than YouTube, please go over to YouTube, throw a sub. It helps us in terms of the ranking, the algorithm, and everything like that. So please throw us a sub over there if you're not subbed. We are on Odyssey and some of the other platforms. So definitely go to our link tree. It's linktr.ee/Why Libertarian. I will end up adding that to the scroll on the bottom eventually when I'm not slacking off. But so tonight we have a fantastic guest. Luckily enough, it's Good Friday. And so luckily enough, this guest was nice enough to come on the evening of Good Friday and kind of hang out with me specifically. So this is Martha Bueno. Good evening, Martha. How are you?
Hello. I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So I want to bring, like, there's been all kinds of drama this week in terms of like being a libertarian, right? But I want to kind of like bring down the temperature a little bit because there's a lot of kind of like edgy stuff going on. But before we get rolling with that, for anyone who's unfamiliar with you, kind of like who are you, and what do you do within the liberty movement?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. So I host a show on YouTube called Libertarios Hispanos, which we do all in Spanish, and it is basically that's the page. It's basically getting libertarian content out to people. I want to say just the United States, but we've had a lot of people from Mexico and Brazil, et cetera, on the show. So we've been getting that content out. And then on top of that, I'm just an activist. And I'm running for office. Sorry, kind of should have started with that, right?
No, that's okay. You do so much that we have like 45 minutes or an hour, depending on how much time you have. But yeah, no, that's a lot. So what office are you running for right now?
I'm running for Miami-Dade County Commission, District 10. So a pretty big seat. In my mind, I never wanted to be a politician, so this is probably the biggest seat that I should go for.
Yeah.
It's pretty big. It's the seventh largest county in the United States.
By population.
By money, by population. I think it's just in general, it's seven largest.
That's incredible.
By money. We've got a $9 billion budget, which is pretty impressive, I think.
Wow. Impressive in terms of how much they've run up the budget.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, come on, $9 billion for, it's a crazy amount, I think.
Yeah. Well, so you'd said you never really kind of like thought about running for politics. What really kind of compelled you to go in that direction and run for an elected office?
So I'm already elected to an office, which is the craziest thing to me. Even, I never really wanted this. I've never wanted to be a politician. I've never wanted to put myself out there. I did it because Florida, a few years back, we were running this First Step program, which is encouraging libertarians to run for the lowest offices for government so that we can, get to that next step, so that we can do the things that that we say we're going to do. We want to we want to run for office, take over, so we can leave people alone. So as the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade, I thought that it would be kind of hypocritical of me to encourage people to go out and run for these seats and not do it in my own neck of the woods, especially when my neck of the woods, there was an open seat that nobody had ever run for. It was just always appointed. So I am the first and only person to run for it, and by default get elected to it.
So let me ask you about that. Was that just no one knew that you could run for the seat, and that's why it was always an appointed position? Or...
No. It's an area. I live in an area in Miami-Dade called Horse Country. There's not that many residents there. It's pretty spaced out. It's a rural area within Miami-Dade, within Miami, the city. So people assume Miami is like Miami Beach or whatever. We actually have a big city out that is not on the beach. And this is like an area that's very rural within that city. And so I guess nobody wanted to run for it. So our commissioners just appointed people to the seat. It's been, I believe this board that I'm elected to has been around since the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And I'm the first person to actually run for the seat. Crazy.
That's very crazy. That's like that's like found money. It's like $20 in the jacket that you found. That's awesome. So all right, so you're taking a step up now in terms of position, right?
I'm a community council member, and now I'd like to be a commissioner. Commission, it's we get elected in our area, but it's county-wide. So there's 13 people on this commission, and they make all the decisions for Miami-Dade County.
Okay. And what's the mix like? Is it very kind of like a left-leaning county, right? Is it evenly split? What's usually the mix?
I think it's countywide, it's pretty evenly split. My area is heavily Republican. Okay.
All right. And that being said, so in terms of the politics that are there, what are you running on? What is really kind of the important thing that's on a lot of people's minds that you are trying to kind of draw that parallel with them on?
Right. So in my area, this seat that I'm running for, we haven't had somebody fresh in the seat since the early 90s. Actually, Javier Soto, who is the commissioner here, he got elected in 1993, and it has been a continuous term for him. 2 terms ago, we finally put in term limits. And so he's at his term limit. And so he can't run anymore. So that's, I think, the number one thing for me is we needed to be able to give people another option, obviously. But then on top of that, there's all the issues that I think us libertarians care about, especially the budget. I mean, we have some real big budget items in Miami-Dade County that worry me, frankly. We spend so much money here on things that we could do better. It's just everything is done kind of in a certain way, the way that they're used to doing it. Nobody comes in with a fresh idea. There's a lot of cronyism, a lot of misspent money. Right now during COVID, they raised our property taxes, which I thought was a horrible time to do it, especially because
Wow.
we haven't had all these services we're supposed to be paying for. And then they're like, hey, give us more money for these services we're not providing. So yeah.
No, that is like, I mean, that's like lemon juice in the wound or salt in the wound. That's like incredible. Being in an area that has a budget that big, I can say that I think a lot of libertarians are beginning to wake up to the fact that, like, if you do get a seat at the table, no one has said anything new in so long that, like, when you do say something new, there's like two responses. One's the positive one, where it's like, oh my God, like finally someone is saying something new and like we can head in a new direction, as if like everyone else was just afraid to rock the boat. And then the other one is just the complete like shock, like, like how dare you, like we've always done things that way,
I'm seeing that now with cannabis. I've been a cannabis advocate for years. And so now that I'm running, people are like, so I guess you're not going to talk about cannabis anymore. I'm like, no, I'm still talking about it. Obviously I'm going to still talk about it. As a matter of fact, now I'm going to have a bigger stage to talk about it from. And it's like, well, no, politicians, you can't do that. You can't talk about cannabis or other drugs.
Why not? Why like why is it?
We'll find out, right? I have no idea.
I'm aware of the state of cannabis legislation in New Jersey, and the fact that recently they just passed kind of like the first step. I wouldn't call it like the best situation possible, but the first step towards legalization, decriminalization in New Jersey. You still can't home grow. There's still restrictions on how much you can possess and things like that. So there's still going to be a black market, and there's still going to be people that go to jail for possession. So they take a big L as far as that goes. But what is it like in Florida? Is there any kind of legalization? Is it just medical? What does that look like?
Florida's it's a raging disaster. So Florida, we do have medical marijuana, but so they limited the number of licenses. Originally, it was to only 5 grows. And now it's up to, I believe, 22. The problem is they want a vertical integration system. So whoever has a license has to grow, has to sell, has to distribute, has to transport, has to do all of the levels of a business. That's like saying the Gap has to make the clothes, ship the clothes on their own planes. It's not like they can hire UPS to ship it across or, put it on a container ship. They have to do every aspect of the business. So they're in the sport, they decided this was the way it was going to be. And so the licenses, since there's only 22, whoever got it, it was like the golden ticket. Yeah. They turned around and sold it. So right now we have this large number of corporations that aren't even from Florida who own licenses in Florida. So people are still going to jail here quite frequently. We actually had a libertarian lady here in Florida at the end of last year come into Florida just to drop off a friend and got arrested for possession of a vape pen and spent over a month in jail. So it's still happening. And, the last license sold for $60 million. And so if you have $60 million, you too cannot go, you can grow and not go to jail. The rest of us, we can't grow. If you happen to buy some cannabis that has a seed in it, and that seed happens to fall in the ground and a tree grows from it, you can go to jail. But if you have $60 million and you buy this license, you can sell it and you can do whatever you want. And it's, I think it's absolutely horrific. I think that it's horrible that you can buy a right, that the government could take that right from us and then sell it to the highest bidder. I think it's just absolutely horrific. There's no excuse for it. And there's no intention of it going away anytime soon. As a matter of fact, our legislators just decided to try and pass a 10% cap on THC. So thankfully that was tabled a little while ago, but that was a big deal for me. I mean, I know patients that need this medicine. It's doing wonders for them. And to cap it at 10%, when there's not a single doctor had come out and spoken about it and said, hey, we need a 10% cap. It was just politicians politicking. Yeah.
No, it's like, there's so much there to unpack, because there's, and I'm preaching to the choir because you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth politically, right? The idea that bureaucrats can essentially strip you of your right and then kind of auction it back to you and only give it to the wealthiest of us is inherently classist and for the most part racist, right?
Absolutely.
Like it is incredibly limiting in terms of who can actually do it. We're going to run into a similar problem in New Jersey. In fact, we've already seen it happen in Colorado and California. You've seen consolidation because the amounts of money to deal with the regulation and some of the other like bogus requirements that are tacked onto this end up meaning that, you know, only the wealthiest and like hedge funds and private equity firms can own these licenses and operate these operations. Meanwhile, they're saying, oh, well, it's what's best for the minority community. I like you obviously don't speak for the entire, you know, Latino community, but, you know, within your kind of like constituency in your network, what seems to be the feedback? Like, are they okay with the way it is, or is there some dissent in terms of what the structure is?
You know, I find politics to be quite funny. In it's the only field that you can go into and be very mediocre, and people are just like, that's how it is. So in this case, people just, you know, you assume that it's, well, that's how it goes. And everybody's just, well, but that's how it is. You know, these politicians, and they just kind of like, meh. And so I don't think that people.
It's a beauty pageant for ugly people is what it is.
That's terrible.
Sorry to cut you off.
That is absolutely horrific. But you're right. I think that it's, you know, our politicians came up with this, and people just take it.
Yeah.
That's the truth. They just take it. And so when you propose that this idea that they can take away your right and sell it back to you, people are like, well, you know, of course I'm not talking about the libertarians and the activists within the community, because we're pissed. You know, we don't like this. There was actually in the original law, there was supposed to be a license specifically for African-American farmers. So there was one license that was supposed to go because there was a lawsuit. I think it was a Pigman lawsuit. Don't quote me on that. That Black farmers particularly were affected by the laws and et cetera. And that license just never was given out. It was, I don't even know what, you know, so here you have all these people that have been marginalized for years. Yeah. And then there's this thing that they've been growing, you know, illicitly for years, and they're good at it. And hey, why can't they be brought to the table? Why can't they have, you know, the benefit of it? And then now when you look at the mix, I think there's like 5 Floridian companies left. There's a very small number of actual Floridians in this industry now. And I mean, I can't express how horrified I am. I recently got a hemp license to grow hemp. I wanted to get the cannabis license, and I had an entire group together, and we had the money that you needed a few $1 million just on the side in cash in order to be able to apply for the license. But they bypassed that. They didn't give out the licenses. You couldn't even get that. And so I went instead into the hemp field. And now Florida is so silly with their rules that I got a hemp license last year. Based on that hemp license, I just invested a lot of money into my farm to grow, to, you know, and now I found out that I have to reapply every year, like as if I was brand new. So I'm in the middle of construction for these greenhouses that are costing me a lot of money in Florida. It's like, apply again. Let's see how it goes, you know? And so I hope I get my license, but if I don't, let's see what happens.
Yeah. That's something that, look, the people that say free market, this seems to be almost a universal misunderstanding. The idea of kind of like free market or anything like that really has to do with, they think, like a lot of people hear that and they think just complete free for all. And that's truthfully not what it is. It is an idea of actually more stability than we have now, because like you're pointing out, you have essentially a government dictated restriction on who can produce an organic product, a freaking plant that grows out of the ground, okay?
Like tomatoes.
Yeah, I mean, replace whatever you want, tomatoes, hay, corn, whatever. For one reason or another, this plant is like ridiculously restricted, so much so that if you grow it improperly, they will send someone to your property with guns to kill you. And you like apply for the license, it takes a ridiculous amount of money, and then on top of that, there's no guarantee you will actually be able to bring a crop to market. You've just gone through the process and put all this money on the side, and arbitrarily, like tomorrow, they could be like, nope, sorry, like, yeah, like we're going to give it to someone else, or we're going to cut it off. Yeah.
Right. There's no guarantee. They were really open with the hemp licenses. Actually, it was, I don't want to say free, but it's pretty much free. It was just a background check and submitting some paperwork. So the hemp license, they went completely different than they did with the cannabis license, which is funny because it's actually the same plant. There is an industrial hemp, which is different, but hemp is essentially the same plant as cannabis. It's just the THC level to be considered hemp is 0.03 or less, but it's the same plant. Actually, some of the strains are very similar. I mean, it's just, so they decided to do it differently and not charge the millions of dollars that it costs to get a marijuana license. But the insecurity is still there. I mean, there's still a whole business you have to build out, and there's still money to be invested. And it is very scary that they can just take away your license to grow from one day to the next. I mean, there's no guarantee in this industry. And had I have known, I might have made different choices.
Well,
sure.
I think you're not alone. I think there are a lot of people that are in that position that are entrepreneurial and they want to capitalize on it because they see the value, but they're just either one, not allowed, or two, if they are allowed, they're balancing on such a very fine point that, God forbid you say the wrong thing to a government official and they're like, I'm having a bad day, I'm just going to take your license or not renew you or something like that. My brother's tuning in here from Georgia, and he basically wanted to point out, the hemp stocks seem to outlive the economic decay that's, out there. It's like there's also an aspect of replacement of plastics, right? Like hemp, marijuana plants, like there is a multitude of uses. There's an entire economy that could come from this, and it's being completely squandered by bureaucracy. And what do you think the impetus for? Is it just control? Like, is it just power?
I think there's so much to it, and I can't really put my finger on it. I've been in this industry for a while, and yes, it must be control. Yes, it must be the economics of it. But it's just so sinister and so long. This prohibition has gone on for so long. And then hemp can be used for so many things, from clothing to hempcrete. I'm here in South Florida where we have hurricanes. Imagine houses made out of hempcrete. And hempcrete is stronger and able to withstand hurricanes better. And I think it's waterproof. Actually, the plant itself, it wasn't until I grew my first hemp plant that I realized how amazing this plant is. So the first, I don't even want to call it a batch because it was just kind of like hey, let's see how bad we can do this and see what happens. I had several plants. I didn't stake them, and I had several plants just fall over. And on any other tree, any other living, tree that falls over, it just dies, especially if it cracks in half and, one half is on the ground and there's just this. Cannabis is such an amazing plant that it'll keep growing even as and if you stand it up and tape it, it'll just regenerate. I mean, this plant is so amazing. I think you have to be around it to really appreciate how amazing it is. And obviously, that must be why it's so good for your body as well. I mean, it literally will regenerate and cause itself to just, I don't know. I'm so amazed by this plant. Obviously I use it. But I love with it. I think it's an awesome thing.
It sounds like you run a farm outside of just this, right? Like, do you also have farmland where you're cultivating it for other products? Okay.
We're just cultivating. We're just getting started, but I'm a fifth generation farmer. My dad was a farmer, and his dad, and his dad, so on. No.
That's incredible. I can tell you that I can grow some things. Like tomatoes are fantastic for me. I've never grown hemp individually, but it sounds like it's very forgiving, which I would appreciate. Whereas something that's delicate, I am not good at whatsoever.
It has its things. It's not that easy. Like you don't want to water it from above; it'll get mold. I mean, it has its things. It is a little temperamental, but it is forgiving. I mean, look, we grow it here in South Florida. You can grow it in Colorado. You can grow, it is forgiving. It is a plant that'll take to many conditions. You can grow it indoors. You can grow it outdoors.
Yeah. That's one of the problems I have with it not being legal for home grow is there's obviously a restriction there that is, it's not even for the greater good. Like there's a restriction there just so the government knows, the plants that are being grown. Like I think that's the connection that people need to make that they're not making. When the government puts these restrictions in place, it's not that it's like for the greater good or it's like to protect you or anything like that. It's because they literally want to know where all the legal plants are being grown so that when they find an illegal one, they know that they can, fine you, put you in jail or whatever. Like that is, and it's inherently nefarious. Like I can't explain to people how nefarious that is. It's like, it's evil. Like, do you get that same impression? Like I'm of that mindset that like 90% of what government does nowadays is just pure like evil, not altruistic evil.
I think so. So my father didn't actually, he was a farmer, but he didn't grow plants. He's a cattle farmer, right? Yeah. And one of the crops that cattle love to eat, and I discovered this because right when I purchased the farm for my father, his cattle were still there, and they absolutely loved the hemp plants. I mean, and it's so cheap and easy to grow a field of hemp, especially if you're just going to use it for feed. And so it's completely evil. Here we have this superfood. You can eat the seeds. The plant itself is good. The buds obviously are good. It's good for CBD. It's good for so many things. We've now discovered Delta 8, which is fantastic, and it's good for pain relief. So this plant has so many uses. And here we have a government saying you can't even grow it to feed it to your cattle. What's a field of hemp for cattle to the government? And that you can't do that. And I think it is evil, and it's especially evil when you see how much good it does to medical patients, when you see the over 70 conditions that it helps. So, and on the flip side of that, we have the same products being made, synthesized, right? So we have Marinol. I forget the name of the other cannabis product that is FDA approved. So we have these approved medications because the government is aware that it's beneficial, it works. And yet we can't have a plant, that grows so easily to give to people. So yeah, there's some nefarious, definitely. There's something nefarious there. I don't want to say what it is. I don't know that I know what it is either.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's the other, not to go down a rabbit hole, but I mean, that's the other issue that we run into with just anything that's associated with government. Right now we live in, and this is completely juxtaposed to how this country started, right? Like the country started completely skeptical of politicians and people that would be governing. And nowadays it's almost like the flip side. It's like, like the people that govern are these like debutantes and, Hollywood-esque figures that we look to, and they're like these untouchables. And the decisions that's made, it's like, if you dare question what's made, it's like, oh, well, they're the governor or they're the mayor or they're the whatever. Like, they obviously know more, or they have the best interest of everyone in mind. And you're like, no, absolutely. Like, they're just like you and me.
How do we get there? Like the majority of us see most people and we're like, oh, that guy doesn't even know anything. And then the moment you're elected to office, people are like, oh, like how did we get here? Most of us just assume everybody else is like, not that smart or whatever. And so what is it about getting to elected office that automatically makes them better? I don't get it either. I don't get
Yeah.
how we just assumed. I mean, how many times did you hear like, oh, Donald Trump is so good and he cares about the people and he's doing all these things? And it's like, I don't know. And it's the same group of people that think that businessmen are evil. And so,
some are, right? But it's typically the ones that use government to do their bidding, right? Like those are the evil ones. Like the guy who's on the street corner who's busting, or the woman who's on the street corner busting their rear end to like make a living. They're not evil. They're like they're better. Like they're just as good as you and I because they're just trying to provide for their family. And it's become this like, evil word to say like, that capitalism or personal gain has become, this bad thing. It's really kind of disheartening in a way,
My favorite was the guillotine outside of Jeff Bezos's apartment. I mean, I'm sorry, but I am old. I remember the days where we had to actually leave our houses to go buy everything. Jeff Bezos is a hero, a personal hero of mine. I get it. He does some shady stuff. He's not perfect. I don't think he's one, I don't think everything he does is great, but here's somebody that created a business that just didn't exist before. I started an internet company in the early 2000s, and trust me, it was hard back then to do, UPS wasn't used to carrying your product, your packages, and it was just the US Postal Service too. It was just difficult. And Jeff Bezos created this empire by which now we don't even leave our homes. It is amazing. COVID, these COVID lockdowns have been horrible. We don't have to get into that. But imagine this COVID lockdown without being able to just, order something on your phone and click and swipe and it arrives to your house. How much more miserable would we have been without that ability? Yeah. And so, the guillotine outside of his house was just, I don't know.
It's the wrong house. It's the wrong house. You need to put it out in front of the government official's house. That's where it goes. Like, so that being said, like, shameless self-promotion, like last night, Thursday night is going to be like I have this amazing person by the name of Josiah that is out in Montana, and he's done an incredible amount of research and has so much more to go that has to do with like natural rights and things like that. And the restrictions, people do not understand what the legal restrictions are supposed to be on government officials, police officers, judges, lawyers, like all of those people, like there are legitimately some laws that are on the books that say if this person commits fraud in like a legal proceeding, that they could be like sent to jail and suffer, a sentence up to and including death. Like it says penalty of death in there for like a judge. That's like completely juxtaposed to the way that we live now, where all of these people are these kind of like anointed kings and rulers. It's incredible. Let me ask you this. DeSantis, you have a governor who has half a brain at least, okay, maybe 2/3 of a brain, I'll give him, right? He came out in opposition of the vaccine passports. Is that something, one, that you're in favor of his stance on, and two, what's kind of been the tenor of people in South Florida with relationship to him coming out against that?
So I think DeSantis is on an upswing. I think that people really like him. And I've known that he's going to be the Republican darling for president for a while now. That 10% THC cap that I was talking about earlier, there was this big rumor going around that they were putting that in place so that DeSantis could come out with his big veto pen and, no, that's not going to happen in Florida. And then he was going to get the props for it. So he's whoever's helping him is doing a great job. As far as the vaccine passport coming out against that, I think him being opposed to it is fantastic. I'm not sure. I really haven't reviewed what I think he put in some executive order or some ruling, something. He did something to ban it in Florida. And I think that's where we have a problem. I am against vaccine passports myself, but I think that if you are a business and you want to require a vaccine passport, that is your right. So while I agree with him in principle, I just think that businesses should be allowed to require it if they so choose. I mean, I wouldn't frequent that business, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to. So it's a mixed bag. I do think he's going to make it very far in politics. He will probably be one of the nominees for president, and unless the Libertarian Party can get its ass in gear, he might win.
Yeah. He's definitely got this kind of groundswell. He's got a little bit of that nationalism, component to him, like Trump did, right? And not as much, but some of that brashness or that kind of.
Did you see his campaign video? We might have to bring this up. So his campaign video for governor of Florida is it reads like a Saturday Night Live commercial. It is hilarious, for real. I wish I would have pulled this up earlier. He's like teaching his kids to play like with blocks, and it's like build the wall, and then he reads the kids like make America great again. Oh my God, this video is just. He might be a little bit of a loose cannon in some aspects, but
I'm sure.
It's funny. I mean, it was I don't
know. The sense that I get from him is, and the sense that I get from the process is, I don't think the Republicans are going to make the Trump mistake again, because as much as they liked him being in or him getting elected, I think they regretted his 4 years in the White House, because I do not think they feel it was a productive 4 years. And so I would think that DeSantis will need to show that he's controllable. Like, and again, this might be just the conspiracy theorist in me, and I would love to ask your opinion on this. Like, from me, I always see politicians from the standpoint, they like the establishment parties don't like free thinkers. Like, they don't loose cannons. They like someone who has skeletons in their closet, because then they can use that to control them so that they don't go off half-cocked. Like, do you get that sense from, at the very least, the two establishment parties?
Oh, of course. I mean, look at Matt Gaetz right now. He started going off the Republican talking points and started saying that marijuana should be legalized, and just, he started putting in some very libertarian-esque almost policies, and now they just came, now he's being blackmailed for some sort of human trafficking. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm not saying he did do it. I'm just saying that it's very shocking to me that he started going off. For a minute there, I was like, wow, he went from being not the greatest to having some actual good ideas. Bravo. And then now it's this. So I think that the establishment really doesn't like free thinkers. I'm pretty sure that I will discover that firsthand if I haven't already in my race. But the only thing that I don't agree with you is I don't think that they're two different parties per se. I don't think that they're really two different parties. And so if we look at it from that point of view, we've advanced so much in terms of how much government control there is. So if you don't believe that it's one team versus another, that it's just a team, that team has gotten full control of us. So because, they was like, well, you can't have Trump again. So let's go with this guy that created all these horrible policies, this guy that chose a cop pretty much to be his running mate in the year of Black Lives Matter, and people are going out. So, I mean, when you look at it from that point of view, and now we're talking about vaccine passports, I mean, in America of all places. Yeah. I can't at this point not think that it's a big deal. It's big. It's coming. I don't know. I'm scared.
So let me, I agree with you. I fall into the trap that a lot of us fall into from time to time, where like I'll use old language, right, from prior to becoming a libertarian and understanding the true, kind of push of the libertarian or liberty movement. I agree with you. I think the Republicans are just the right wing of the Democrat Party. Like, I don't think that there's a true freedom party that's out there, Right. And I agree with you. It's very odd timing. Like, as soon as Gaetz, like Gaetz, I can't pronounce his name correctly, but as soon as he comes out and starts to say some of that truly liberty-based stuff, all of a sudden there's a scandal. Like, it's extremely convenient timing, right?
He had a scandal before with his
Yeah.
adopted son. There was something weird going on before, but I'm assuming that he had to have been vetted. I'm a little nobody, and people know all of my business. So
Yeah.
I have to assume that people knew his business from way before. And so that it's coming up now just seems convenient.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, and it could be one of two things, right? It could be there were skeletons in his closet and they just kind of held on to those receipts until it was time to shut him up, or it's manufactured because he's gaining some momentum. They're trying to derail him. I think either way, it's nefarious. Like,
Right.
if there were skeletons in his closet, we should have known about it way back when, as opposed to, now.
As opposed to
But-
now after he's been in office for a long time.
Exactly.
Or if it's manufactured, oh my God,
Yeah.
Whoa.
Which I would not put past them. Like,
No,
I wouldn't
absolutely
put past
not.
them at all. So let me ask you this. Let me transition to some current events here. So I don't know if you had been paying attention earlier today, but so we have a gentleman drive a car into the barricades outside of the White House. As the news always does, they are like, I mean, they have the accuracy of a meteorologist who's been drinking. Like, I mean, it's absolutely awful. Like, the first report was woman in a car with a gun, then it was guy in a car with a knife, and now they come out and basically release the identity of the gentleman, and he's basically a very militant, kind of like a Islamist, but not like Islamic radical, but just like, he's Muslim. Like, that's basically what his background is. What do you take from that? I find it extremely interesting that everyone was like, oh, Biden's going to bring unity. And the unity that they were thinking was completely different than the unity that I was thinking. The unity I was thinking was in resistance. Right? Did you have the same impression there?
Not from Biden, though. I didn't expect anything. I mean, come on, the man is 78. He can't even walk up a flight of stairs. Let's be honest.
It was the wind, Martha. Like, it's the
Yes,
wind.
absolutely.
It's very violent.
I mean, come on. I moved my mother in with me. My mother's a little younger than Biden and way more vibrant. And I wouldn't be like, she should run the country. And she's wonderful. And she absolutely, without her, I couldn't do half the things I do. So there's something to be said for that help.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want her to run the country. It's just, he needs to not. He needs to have a nap and, enjoy.
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you think he's actually running things?
No, of course not.
I call them sock puppets, right? Because there's someone moving his mouth, like almost definitely.
Did you really think that Trump was really running everything either? I mean, you can't. Okay, you could have the most amazing. People now are like Elon Musk or whatever. Even he couldn't do everything. It's impossible. Yeah. This is like the biggest CEO role ever. It's 350 million people. It's an incredible budget. There's no way one lonely human being at the top is somehow going to manage everything for everyone. And everything that happens is somehow that person's fault. And, I think we need to maybe cut down the size of the presidency and maybe do something a little different now.
Without a doubt, I would say it shouldn't matter who the president is.
No, it shouldn't. But that's the libertarian in us.
Now, if you say that to a lot of people, they like clutch they're like, oh my God, it's the president. Like it's the Oval Office, it's the White House and all this other stuff. It's like, no, they shouldn't matter. Like,
they shouldn't. What should matter is your governor. What should matter is the people in your local office. This office that I'm running for, it has so much control over people's lives and they don't realize it. The lockdowns in Florida, the ones that we had here in Miami-Dade and Broward County, that didn't come from Governor DeSantis. That came from our elected officials. That came from our mayor at the time, Carlos Menes. So, people are so concerned about what's going on in Washington that they lose sight of what really matters, which is, your backyard.
Yeah. Well, and that's also a really good point. I think a lot of people, this is also just a general life point. A lot of people seem to create limits on themselves that don't exist, right? Like, so they create boundaries or goals that they think they can't get to, and it's very much a psychological barrier. It has absolutely nothing to do with what they can actually achieve. I would argue it's the same exact thing with the federal government. When the federal government says, like, here's a law, you can't cross this line, like, most people used to be of the mindset, they were like, the hell with you, you're the federal government, I can do whatever I want, I'm an individual. Within like the last 50, 100 years, it's completely changed. It's been like, here's the line in the sand, and everyone's like, oh, you gotta respect the line. Like, don't cross the line. That's a very sacred line. When truthfully, it doesn't matter. Like, we are an individualist society. Is the Latino community an individualist community, or is it more collectivist?
I think it's individualist, but it's beaten out of us a bit. My family's Cuban. The Cuban community, we're starting to see somewhat of an uprising within Cubans on the island, but it's just not enough. They keep waiting for the United States to show up and be like, knock at the door and be like, we're here, we're going to fix this for you. So I think it's been beaten out of a lot of people, which is why I feel like the libertarian message needs to be broadcast to as many people as possible, because we're so used to it. And the way we're taught in schools, if you went to a public school, and the way that our lives, go on, people just think that the way things are the way they have always been and should be. So things simply, just simple things like a ticket. You get a ticket because you were driving your car and a police officer stopped you. And everybody's like, yes, that's exactly how it should go. If you have a light out in the back of your car, you should be stopped by a police officer and given a ticket. In a society, shouldn't somebody be like, excuse me, your light is out, you might want to go get that fixed because you can get hurt? I mean, really, why do you have to get a ticket? And then all this group of people are like, yep, that's just the way it goes. That's how it is. It's just so many of these, and this isn't even something new. We used to have laws, and we still have some on the books, against sodomy. What is it? When people do things in their own bedroom, why does the government even have a law regarding this? And I mean, there's so many silly laws. So I don't know.
It really comes down to control. Like, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And a close buddy of mine here in New Jersey, Dan Francisco, is a founding partner of this nonprofit called Blue Star Union, and they're very much about civil liberties. And 2 or 3 of his focuses are First Amendment, Second Amendment, and then like education. And so he had someone on the other night.
He's got the good top ones.
Yeah, those are the foundation. Like, that's the foundation of our society, right? And so he had someone on from an anti-gun group the other night, and it just occurred to me that a lot of people have either by having it almost bred out of them, or having just such thick propaganda that they don't feel like they have the right to defend themselves.
Right.
Like it's it seems like a colloquialism or kind of like a reductio ad absurdum, but I see a lot of people and they just strike me as herd animals. They have absolutely no survival instinct left in them. And to that point, the Cuban community is probably much better to listen to, because a lot of you, either directly or indirectly, or maybe one degree of separation, have lived through a society that shows you what the worst case scenario is. Right? Like, that's what collectivism becomes. Do you think that message is spreading, or do you think it's actively being kind of suppressed so that people don't actually hear the truth?
It's being suppressed, and it's the Cuban government is really good at that propaganda. I've been speaking out against socialism for a while now, and any post that I make, pretty much, especially on Facebook, like on my campaign page on Facebook, I get attacked by these crazy ideas. Just the other day, I posted something. It's like, this is what it's like being in a campaign. Just showing people the messages that I get, and it's like, there's more food in Cuba than there is in the United States. We're more food insecure here than they are over there. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I have family that lives there that I have to help support because they can't earn a living. First of all, they're not part of the party, which is the first obstacle. So if you're Cuban and you are part of the party, and I don't mean just yes, I'll agree with Fidel or, Raul or whatever. No, you have to actually work for the party, then you're able to have a job, which you're able to make your $40 that you get a month, which is not nearly enough to survive. So the first step is, if you're not part of the party, you aren't even entitled to have a job. You can't make ends meet. So that's number one. You're forced into a system. If you choose not to join that system, then you have no means. There's no safety net for you. If you get taken to the hospital, you're probably not going to get treated. And even the people who are part of the party, you have to be high up, high-ranking official to get the good treatment, the one that Michael Moore wanted when he went over there. So it's a very difficult system. And so their propaganda machine is really good. I talk to people here and they're like, what do you mean? Cuba has better healthcare. They have longer life expectancy. They have better food. And, I'm because I have my family there that I talk to all the time, I know that this isn't true. And yet I'm being told this constantly. And it's very frustrating to hear, young Americans who maybe haven't even left America ever, that don't understand how amazing America really is. With all these problems we have going on, America's still maybe we're not the best country, but we're definitely in the top few. And the things we have here, you don't get in the rest of the world. I lived in Venezuela for 6 years, and I can tell you, being poor in Venezuela is horrible. I mean, you have access to nothing. You might not even get more, a meal a day. And maybe there's some people here in America that have that, but there's places to go. There are safety nets. If you reach out to people, people will help you here, because we have this volunteer system where people want to help. That doesn't exist in other parts of the world. And so I think that people who haven't left the United States, it's really easy to bash it. And it's really easy to be like, this place sucks. I only have, an iPhone 7. I need to have whatever the newest one is. And, I'm raising my kids. They've left the country a few times, but they're a little bit like that. And it's like, you don't know what real, hunger and being really poor is. And so I think we've lost a little bit of that sight. And it's hard. It's hard to get that message across to people. It really is. I wish the Cuban propaganda was a little less than it is, but they're doing a damn good job. They really are.
Well, you know what the problem is? I mean, the Cuban propaganda then gets amplified by the American propaganda that's out there, right? And that just puts it on steroids. I think that's the other thing that people, and that's why I'm actually optimistic about the Biden presidency, is this is actually the moment in time where the most people have had the opportunity to see that the emperor has no clothes, right? Like, they legitimately don't care about you, and they're not even like singing like, sweet songs to like lull you to sleep. They're telling you in your face, like, we don't care about you. We are going to do whatever we want. And then the smack in the face is that the most prominent, news stories that are out there are like, Biden's dog bites someone at the White House. And you're like, why does that matter? They're about to pass an authoritarian ID that we need to show to get into certain public venues. Like, and that juxtaposition, I think, has caused some people to really be shook out of the sleep that they've been in. Is that something that's also...
enough. I don't think it's enough.
Well, it's not enough, but at least it's a start, right? Like, it's at least a start. And it gives people like you and I the ability to scream and be like, we told you so. Like,
I've been in this boat before. I feel like I lived in Venezuela prior to Chavez taking hold. I lived there in the late 80s, early 90s. And when before Chavez, took over and stuff started to happen, my father used to go around to all his friends and like, I'm going to get out of here. This is reminding me of Cuba. This is like Cuba, and it's going to happen again. And everybody was like, you're wrong. This is Venezuela. Look at all of our riches. Look at how much petroleum we've got. I mean, this is never going to happen here. And here we are. And so I kind of feel like, yes, some people are waking up, but really, I feel like I'm having a little bit of deja vu. And I'm looking around going, the difference between my father when he lived in Cuba and my father living when we lived in Venezuela is that we always had a place to come. Where the heck are we going to go when this thing, when it goes bad, when it goes south? I don't know where else there is.
I have a crazy theory. Tell me whether or not I'm completely off base. I think there's going to get a point in time where there is going to be a wide-scale reverse immigration into Mexico. I think the fact that there are territories that are basically controlled by the cartels means that those areas are actually freer than the areas that are controlled by central government. No?
Horrible. Oh my gosh. We were, like I was telling you before we started the show, yesterday on Libertarios Hispanos, we had Dr. Adrián Cervantes, who is from the Libertarian Party of San Luis Potosí in Mexico. So, and he was just telling us about the cartels being, the amount of murders in Mexico, especially in these controlled. Yeah. I mean, we as Americans, we go to the touristy places and we're like, ooh, Cancun, but the Mexico, that's the real Mexico. They have a horrible, horrible rate of just mutilations, deaths. I mean, it is out of control. And they also have a policy where people there are like, you don't need guns. And then, the cartels have guns and the police have guns. And, they have a lot of problems. I don't know that Mexico's the place to go. I'm not looking to Mexico. And then, I mean, where? Europe is a no. They're in worse lockdowns still than we have.
At least they're fighting back, though. What's reassuring, or not reassuring, but actually kind of unnerving a little bit is like, we're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, and you've got people that are legitimately standing up in Germany and France and England, like actually fighting for freedom against, arguably worse lockdowns than we have, which is weird because, 20 years ago, if you traveled to Europe, they'd be like, oh, stupid Americans, you think you're all free and you could do whatever you want, and like we abide by this amazing government. I think it's really funny that kind of like the shoe is on the other foot, where now all of a sudden they're fighting against the police officers,
Yeah, I agree. The world is kind of changing, and I don't like the way we're going about it. I think that it is worldwide. We do have this sort of change, and people want a collective, they want a socialist society. And instead of being like, hey, move to Europe and have it there, where they're okay with it, we're trying to impose it, especially here in the United States. And it's really sad. I really am sad. I have grown up with this love of America, this love of what America represented, especially to me, to my family. My father was sentenced in Cuba. He was given a 6 to 8 year sentence for trying to leave Cuba. And in 1969 was able to escape. My mom helped him escape jail and come to this country. And so I've grown up with this idea of the United States being, not only did it welcome my family, but we showed up here, or my parents showed up here without a penny to their name, and were able to create something and become something. And that rags to riches, or maybe not even riches, rags to middle class, story it was ingrained in me. And I've seen it happen time and time again. Venezuelans that come here and are able to make it, and Mexicans that come here, and Guatemalans that come here, and it's the home of so many of us, because there's really not a whole lot of unless you're a Native American, we're all some kind of immigrant here. Right. And it is a home that has accepted us all and given us all, some people more than others. And we've done a horrible job in this country with some groups of people. And it hasn't been perfect, but it has been good to a lot of people. And to see where we are right now is just, it kind of breaks my heart. And at the same time, like I've said before, it worries me. It worries me because where am I going to go from here? I've already moved around enough. I want to stay here. I'd like to stay here and fight for that freedom that made us so amazing. That freedom that in 200 years pulled more people out of poverty, not just in the United States, but worldwide, than any other system ever before. And on the flip side, you have socialism and communism that has not only killed a whole group of people, but made more people poorer than any other system in the world. So we keep going to this horrible system that has failed time and time and time and time again, when we have this amazing system and we're like, oh, it's not perfect, so let's just throw it away and, find something else. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's almost like we're victims of our own success, or we've had it, and I'll use air quotes. We've had it good, for so long, right? I would argue that we succeed despite our government. I would succeed Absolutely. That the United States government is one of the most amazing parasites that's ever been created, because the American people are so fantastic that the American government gave enough leeway, enough freedom for the American people to be successul, so that they can steal all of our money and and take all of our freedom.
I don't think they gave us that leeway. We had.
Well, no, I mean, like we held them off for long enough. Let me put it that way. Off
for a while, and then now we are here. We're in, and oh boy.
Well, so I want to be respectful of your time. We're going in an hour, but I want to ask you one more question that kind of relates to more of the global perspective. We were talking a little bit more before we went live about how the libertarian movement is more than just the United States. It is very much kind of a global movement, and you made reference to folks in Mexico. What's your feedback been from, say, like other Latino countries that are maybe going through similar circumstances, or maybe even worse circumstances, and kind of the state of libertarianism, or at least the push for liberty in those countries?
So the push for liberty is fairly new in all these other countries. In the United States, we've had 50 years, the Libertarian Party is 50 years old. So we at least know that for 50 years, somebody's been trying to push this message of freedom. In Latin America, it's very new. Within the last 10 years at best. But you have places like Guatemala that has the only libertarian university in the world. So it's amazing. Francisco Marroquin University. It's I've never been there. It's a goal of mine to get there as soon as we're able to travel freely. With our show with Libertarios Hispanos, we had Gloria Alvarez and Antonella Marti, who are really well-known libertarians in Latin America. Antonella Marti is from Argentina. Gloria Alvarez is from Guatemala. And they came and they spoke. And because I feel like I have I listened to them, listened to other people in Latin America, I feel like libertarians in Latin America, they've lived through some stuff that here our libertarians here in the United States haven't. And they still infight amongst themselves. Just 2 nights ago, I was on a Mexican women for podcast celebrating women's history, and they were like, "Oh, our party here, we're all infighting." I was like, "Yes, we're not the only ones," but libertarians across Latin America are gaining traction, not fast enough, unfortunately, but there's libertarian parties all around Latin America. There's a Libertarian Party of Spain that they're trying to do things, and our goal with Libertarios Hispanos is to unite these different countries, these different factions, because we gain so much more by hearing other people's perspective, by being able to share the ideas that work, by being able to see, ooh, that didn't work, let's stay away from that. I think that, libertarians, we tend to think that this interventionalist philosophy we have means not to talk to our neighbors. And I think that's the opposite. I think that libertarians, I mean, you all around the world, they have these great ideas. They really do. And Antonella and Gloria, I mean, one of the things, without going too long, hopefully, that I heard Gloria say that it kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, she has a point, is how people compare socialism and capitalism. And she used the idea of a movie, of a romantic movie, like your favorite rom-com. And when you compare your own personal relationships in your life to a rom-com, you're like, oh God, my partner sucks. I mean, he doesn't sing songs out my window, with a boombox or whatever, whatever.
Never brings flowers home unless it's a holiday, damn it.
Right. I mean, even if it's a great relationship, when you compare it to the fantasy that is a movie, you're like, meh. So that's basically why we have all these kids that idolize socialism, because it's that movie, because everybody's like, oh, well, that idea didn't work. It's been tried in Cuba, but that's not real socialism. Look at how it turned into communism. No, that's not real. But look, it's tried over here. And it's like, but that's not real, because their idea of this real socialism is that fantasy that's been sold. It's this idea over here that everything is going to be great and everybody's going to pull their weight and everybody's going to do the same, their part in it. And then capitalism, we live in it. And so it's that relationship you have that, God, I got to work at this.
Yeah.
I got to pick up the socks off the floor, like it's tough.
Yeah.
And so I love having the connection of Latin America and being able to talk to these wonderful people, because, ideas come from everywhere. And when you only have a group of people, if you're only listening to libertarians within the United States, the ideas tend to run out and you don't get to hear these great, just little ideas like that one. I love that, because I do think that that's why people see socialism as such a great thing, because they've never actually experienced one that's the real deal. They've never had that real socialism that worked the way they expected it to. And most people just think that it's because it wasn't done right, instead of, no, that's how it all happens. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And in the United States, we also, we enjoy the illusion. We enjoy many illusions, right? And so, not to get too far deep into a different issue, but, like just economically, I mean, the ability to essentially print infinite money, okay, one is a complete illusion. Like, you can't, right, without causing like wide sweeping damage and carnage. And that's what we're at the point of right now, right? But that being said, if any country could, do more of that, it's the United States. I mean, like, the idea of too big to fail in 2007 and 2008 is enigmatic of the United States. Like, the United States debt burden and how much influence we have over global commerce and the economy means that, like, we get so much more leeway. It's why it was, like, so ironically, I don't know what to call it. Like, it was just ironic that Trump gets the presidency, because he's sitting there talking about, like, well, you know what happened when I had all kinds of this debt? I said, give me more debt, otherwise you're going to go out of business because I don't set. And I'm like, that's America. Like, that's exactly what we do. We saddle everyone else with our debt and our money printing, and if they don't do what we say, like, they go down with us. Right. And it's leverage, but it's an awful kind of leverage to have. It's like really dangerous. But Latin America, we need to listen. Like, we need to listen better to Latin America, because, like you said, like, we have it good. Like, they're living the truth and the reality of why you don't want to go down that road, and they're actually fighting the opposite direction that a lot of, specifically young people in this country are fighting in that direction. So
the young people in Latin America know that socialism is bad. Unfortunately, they don't have, they don't really have the way to change maybe the system. They have no guns, they have no power, etc. But in the United States, we have the young people that are pushing for socialism more often than not, and it's a thing.
It's definitely a thing. It's tough bringing education to those people, for sure. I want to thank you. This has been absolutely fantastic. Look, I'm completely naive because I come from a different, a different background and a different way of life, and I appreciate you kind of, bringing some of your background and your perspective to this show and to me specifically. If anyone wants to connect to you on Twitter, what is your Twitter handle?
It is at Martha Bueno 18. There awesome. You go. and
I would say to anyone who's watching, check out your response to AOC's, was that an Instagram live or whatever that she did?
She did an Instagram live, and she said, I had to. I mean, I try and not talk about AOC because she's a little socialist, and, why bring her more attention? But in this case, a lot, in this case, she said that people migrate to this country because of climate change. And my mind was blown. I mean,
Yeah.
I talk to people who have just come over the border a lot,
Yep.
and none of them come over because it rained extra in their country. Not a
Yeah.
single one. You know, and
She
it's funny that
she had a moment of religion, and I think you agreed with her on it. It had to do with foreign policy, right?
yeah. Oh, on that same Instagram live, sure. She
Yeah.
talked about how the United States has its imperial, this imperialism. We dictated Latin America. We've done things. I mean, we installed puppet dictators in Nicaragua. We've told all these countries that drugs are illegal and they can't produce them, even though that's kind of what they're good at. I mean, it's what they're really good at. And
Yeah.
so, the whole narco regime is because of this drug war that the United States has. If Colombia, if Venezuela, if all these countries could produce drugs and sell it legally, that would change the dynamic. They have to have this Mexico, they have to have this narco regime because it's an illegal trade, so the government can't do it. But also that illegal trade funds Cuba, funds Venezuela, funds these dictators. I mean, she was right. We do have a big part in this, but then
the train was on the tracks for about 15 seconds. and then it made a left turn.
Completely off the track, just barreled down. Yeah, she has her moments. She has her moments of clarity, and then it's just like, whoa. And I hate to be like, you're not libertarian enough or you're not Latina enough, but AOC, you're not Latina enough. She doesn't speak the language and stuff. So maybe she just hasn't, there's a barrier to the language barrier, and she hasn't been able to speak to people who just got here to ask them why they're here.
No, but you don't understand. She was at the fence. She was crying. She saw everything. Yeah, she saw everything happen firsthand.
Oh my God, that was the worst. I felt so embarrassed for her.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that, like, as and not to keep you over time here, but I mean that's also kind of an insult to, like, Latin culture too. Like the idea that these people are coming here and that she has a moment of clarity where you're like, you were so close, like you understand that the United States is exacting its imperialistic will on other countries. And then you use that opportunity to pivot to another just complete, hollow political end or ideal. Like, stay on that. Like, let's find some common ground on that, because you identify that is a major problem. That's why people are coming here. Let's stop, bombing other countries and meddling in their politics. And maybe people would be able to create a country that was, worthy of, or that they would like to stay in, as opposed to come here.
I mean, we can't blame everything on the U.S., right? So Venezuela, yes, the U.S. has some sanctions, but I think the U.S. has sanctions on 5-10 people. It's a real small number, and yet every time I post something about Venezuela, I hear, oh well, if the United States just lifted its embargo. Okay, that's not happening. That's not a thing. And the United States started those sanctions, I think, in 2018. I mean, Venezuela has been screwed up for 20 years now. With this situation that's going on, the United States didn't cause it and doesn't perpetrate it. We just haven't gone in there to fix it either. Cuba, we've had an embargo since before Castro took over. We've had an embargo on Cuba since the early 50s. So, the things that people say and blame the United States for sometimes just gets old. There's plenty of countries that do trade with Cuba, Venezuela being one of them, Brazil, I mean, China. So they have the ability to continue to make money and do things without the United States. The United States it is evil, but we're not the reason why things in Latin America aren't working. But we do have these policies that make it really bad. And so it's a fine line to walk. And I hate when, people just come at me with the same thing over and over again. It's like, come on, the United States, it's not always our fault. I mean, cut it some slack.
Well, you have to understand nuance, right? Like, so for instance, like Central and South America, our meddling was greater in the 80s and 90s, or maybe even back in the 70s. Whereas nowadays it's mostly the Middle East, right? Like that's where our focus is. Now, some of it could be fallout, but you've had 20 years of like, all right, well, what came in afterward, right? Like, and
Right.
that's kind of the piece of it. Let me ask you about borders. So, really quickly here at the end, this is like a loaded question, right? But are you like more of an open borders person? You're more of a closed borders person, or are you kind of like somewhere in the middle?
Oh boy, if this gets me in trouble. I am.
You
I
can defer if you want. You can plead the fifth. This is the United States. It's all right.
No, 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 no. So I am the type of person that thinks that those lines drawn in the sand are kind of ridiculous. I think that peaceful people that want communities should be able to, because we're humans. And you know what? We should have the opportunity to better our lives. I'm not my family and I, we're not more special. We're not more than somebody else. So I have directly benefited from a law that allowed Cubans to come to the United States. And once we stepped, my parents came over before that was the law, before when you put your foot on American soil, you could stay. But I benefited from that. And so for me to turn around and say, it's good for me, but not good for you, I think that's just ridiculous on my part. And then on top of that, immigration is good. Having a young population in this country is good for us financially. And then immigrants come and work really hard and don't really take the resources, and they generally don't commit as many crimes. So there's all these reasons why immigrants are good in America. So I'm totally for it. And I also see the other side. Yes, our welfare is terrible, but most of them don't even qualify for welfare. So I'm all for eliminating welfare and all that other stuff, but open borders, 100%. We've got space. I've flown, taken a plane over the United States. We got a lot of empty space.
Yeah. Well, and here's something people also don't understand. When we militarized the border, it trapped people here. And I think that's something that gets completely overlooked, is that a lot of, and again, air quotes, the illegal or undocumented, people that came into this country, say back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of them came in during, say, like, the growing season or the reaping season. And then they left, they went back home. They would bring the money back home. They wanted to go see their family. When we militarized the border, it trapped them here. Right. So what else are they going to do? Like, they're still going to come here for the opportunity,
But now they'd have to stay. So before, like you said, they'd come in, they'd, during growing season, pick the tomatoes, whatever, make their money in 6 months or less, and then go back and be with their families, and then come back for the growing season again. That is the way it should be. It was the way we've done it for a long time. And then now, if you make it across that border, if you pay, and coyotes charge anywhere from $10,000 and above to get people over the border and into the United States. So if you pay that kind of money, if your family manages to make that kind of money in countries where that's more than an annual salary, I mean, that's everything you've got. If you pay all of that, you're not going to go back home. You're not going to go back home because you're not going to make that money back in one growing season. And then once you're here, you have to pay rent. And then, the other things that come with living here that's not on a temporary basis. Our policy is really bad for even Americans. And that border wall, I mean, any wall that stops people from coming in also stops people from going out. And that includes Americans.
I want to give you like a long distance high five, right? Like, walls don't just stop people from coming in. It keeps you from leaving. Like, and we're having this conversation time and time again about how this country is becoming more totalitarian, more authoritarian and fascist. And the idea that, look, like all of these things that are like supposedly done for our own good and our defense and everything like that, a lot of them can backfire on you. And that's one of them. Like, a wall between you and your exit point is not a good thing.
Not a good thing. It is not.
It's not.
And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would you get a second passport? I would have been like, no, I have the best passport in the world. Why would I want a passport other than the American passport? And as of late, I've been looking to see which country I'm going to get a second passport from.
Swiss, right? Like Swiss, I don't think you have to abandon your U.S. passport.
You can get in a lot. I've actually been looking at countries in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Because then you can just spend some money there and they provide you with a passport and you can keep both. I'm not saying I want to abandon my American passport. I would never do that. I mean, come on. It's still a great passport. But, you know, in the off chance that I might need to leave, maybe it's just my history that has me thinking this way. Maybe it's just me. This could be that case, but I am a little squeamish, and I do think that a second passport would come in handy.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people need to, at the very least, ask the hard questions about, you know, what's plan B? I think that is something that a lot of people need to ask themselves, because if they're not, look, I posted the other day about this infrastructure bill and all this spending that's coming out. Like, the U.S. dollar is not the you know, presumptive store of value that a lot of people think it is. And there's a lot of those things right now that are kind of like teetering on the edge. If you're not asking yourself those questions, I mean, it seems like a prepper kind of question, which I've never really been this kind of like doomsday kind of person in my past, but it's never been more apparent than now. It's like, you know, currency, food, transportation, defense. Like, those are the four big things, right? And if you are missing any one of those, you're at risk. Like, you're at risk right now, you know?
And our dollar, it's the world currency, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be the world currency forever. Just look around. How many world currencies have we had? It's not going to be here forever, and we don't realize that. And that's why we've been able to print this much money. And it's also why I think it's only one party, because both parties have done the exact same thing, and they spend the money in the exact same ways. You know, they give it to their buddies and whatever, and they printed these trillions of dollars to give it away. They don't even have to print it anymore. It's just zeros in a computer. But you know, they both subscribe to that same monetary policy, and that monetary policy is going to lead us down a very bad path. So again, it might just be my history, but I keep an eye out for places where I can move to in the event of you know, and being vocal, I think, and being out there and speaking my mind is definitely going to make me a target. I already see it with, you know, I speak enough about the Cuban and the Venezuelan governments that I've seen some things, and I think that I might be more worried than the average person. I can see that.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, before I say goodbye, I do have one comment here. So we were talking about borders. This is kind of like a common thing that comes up, or a common theme that comes up in terms of open borders being a mistake, and that, say, like other countries that have nefarious intent could end up exploiting that. If someone were to, you know, come up in a town hall and ask you that or something like that, what would be your response in terms of that issue?
If a country wants to hurt us by sending their people over, they can do it anyways. I mean, the open border is, and I'm not saying that the United States doesn't have a right to see who's coming in. I'm not saying that they don't have a right to make sure that they're healthy or do some. I mean, an open border doesn't mean just everybody can come in. I would love
that is a common misconception. It's like, you know, everyone thinks absolutely no, you know, tracking or filter or anything like that.
Right. I mean, you can still check cars that are coming across the border and see if they are filled with explosives. But I mean, any country that really wants to hurt us, they can. They can. They can outsmart us. They can do something. They can hurt us. I mean, 9/11 comes to mind. So there's always a way for people to hurt you. How about if we stop hurting other people so that they don't really want to? Because the reason we would be attacked is because we attack others. So, you know, if you really are so worried about that, there's other things we can do. We could stop the 7 wars that we're fighting currently. That would be a great place to start if you're really worried about other countries coming here and messing with us.
That's a really good point. Us being basically imperialistic in our endeavors overseas. And then the other point that people leave out is most of the 9/11 attackers came over from the Canadian border. They didn't come across the Mexican border. So that's also something to remember. But
you wouldn't. If you wanted to send people over, you would send them through the Canadian border, which is a lot easier to get through than the Mexican border.
Most of them come over from the Canadian border. They do it correctly documented the first time, and then they just overstay. Like
Which is what happens with most countries. Most people who come to the United States don't cross at the border. They fly in on an airplane, which is why the wall is stupid anyways. How many Venezuelans crossed over the Mexican border? Not that many. They came across on an airplane with a visa, and then they just overstayed it. You know, it's simple. It's Americans have this view of what Latin America is, or the people that are coming into this country. And first of all, I get it all the time. What part of Mexico are you from? And it's like, well, I'm not. You know, and then
I'm the one that's way off to the east in the water. Like, yeah,
it's the one that's not even on the continent. But you know, I think that Americans, our education system has not helped us out too much, and we're not aware. You know, I'll say things like, "Hey, I don't eat spicy food generally," and people are like, oh, "But aren't you Hispanic?" Well, yes, but there's 20 different countries that Hispanics come from. It's like saying, you know, all Asians are Japanese. No, they're not. There's many different countries. Right. In Latin America is the same. So I think Americans have this view of the world that is not necessarily accurate. They don't necessarily know, you know, where we come from or who we are and why we come here. In the case of AOC, why we come here. And I think the same can be said from, you know, other regions. Why do we get attacked? Well, maybe we should find out. Maybe we should learn that.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe we're looked at as the invaders as opposed to the liberators. No, I want to thank you. I appreciate your time. Look, I'm going to have to have you come back because there's literally like dozens of more questions that I came up with, and we could sit here and talk for hours more. But look, once you get your website up and running, let me know. I will share that as far as I can. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of people from Florida and hopefully, you know, Miami-Dade County that are following me that I can get that to. And then I would love to have you back in terms of like a check-in in terms of how the campaign's going. So
I'd love that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I definitely check out the YouTube channel. Let me throw it up one more time. Oh, I don't have it up anymore. If anyone wants to find it, what can they throw into the search bar on YouTube?
Libertarios Hispanos. So it's Hispanic libertarians. And we do have a very small website for Libertarios Hispanos or HispanicLibertarians.com, either or.
Awesome. Look, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Martha, I appreciate it. Hopefully you have a fantastic, if you're celebrating, you know, fantastic holiday weekend, and good meal with family on Sunday. And I will be back Monday night, so I get the weekend off. That's fantastic. I will be back Monday night at 7. So everyone have a good evening. Martha, thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. This was fun.
Yep, thanks.